Joining us with analysis are Frayne, Olson, and Randy Martinson. Well, the biggest surprise in the report, 91 million acres of soybeans, which is a record, and one of the few times we see soybean acres above corn, right?
Yeah, it has. There was one other year where we did have at least the initial prospective plantings report where soybeans were above corn, but by the time we got to actually putting seed in the ground, it did flip back, so corn was still the dominant crop. Again, really big surprise. We were expecting a shift. The shift was much larger than I think anybody anticipated.
And out of corn, almost 3.8 million acres, so almost a one-to-one shift here, Randy, and obviously some of that because of fertilizer prices?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was that. And then when you look at as far as the Corn Belt's concerned, it was almost a one-for-one shift going over to soybeans, which they're taking away some of their double, or the corn-on-corn acres and putting in soybeans to kind of lower their input costs. It was a little bit of a surprise. I didn't expect to see corn acres take such a hit or soybeans increase as much. Now it's going to be interesting to see how things go from here.
So do you guys think we're going to have to buy some corn acres now?
Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be an incentive to try and shift some of those acres back, to try and rebalance. And if these numbers had come out before the Russia-Ukraine war, or if that hadn't happened, I think the numbers would probably stick. But given the dynamics and the shifts because of the war, the corn acres are going to be at a premium this year. I think we're going to have to try and rebalance, and the market's going to work very hard to do that.
What's it going to take to get to that? Because we already have the corn to soybean ratio favoring corn.
We do, and now part of it too is when is the survey taken? Okay, so the March prospective plantings, the surveys were actually taken the first about 2 weeks of March. And we were aware and understood that the war was occurring at that time, but I don't know that the potential shift in acres really showed up within the survey. So some of those acres that might be able to be flipped, we may be able to pick up, but it's going to have to work pretty hard. As Randy was saying, some of those are going to be corn-on-corn acres, or we're going to have to try them, buy them against some of the smaller market crops, some of the specialty crops, which have already been contracted. So the corn market's going to have to work pretty hard to make sure that we get that shift occurring.
So all wheat acres were up about 700,000 acres, but we were down in spring wheat, much more than the trade anticipated. And Randy, I got to give you credit because I know you called that one early on.
Well, and it made sense. It didn't look like wheat was out there trying to buy acres, and we had such, like Frayne mentioned, such good contracts on a lot of the specialty crops, barley, sunflowers, canola, peas. So everything was out there trying to buy acres, and spring wheat with the higher costs of putting it in with the fertilizer just didn't add up. So it made sense that we were going to see a little bit of a downward trend as far as spring wheat acres are concerned. I was surprised as it was big as it was, and I was surprised that durum acres got a little bit more because there really wasn't an incentive to plant durum.
So what price will it take to get a few acres of spring wheat? We're going to need more, so what's the function of the market now?
I think right now we're going to have to take this market back up to the contract highs to try to get acres. We also now will see what kind of influence this will have on Canada, what they're going to decide to plant. Right now they're looking at feed grains as well because they are tired of importing feed grains from the U.S. So they're going to look at barley and corn themselves. So it's going to be interesting to see, but I think wheat has to go to new contract highs to get acres.
So let's talk about the shift into some of the minor acres or minor crops.
Yeah, with the drought that we had here in the region, some of the really smaller market crops, everybody that I talked to was asking questions about oats, asking questions about flax. Barley was one of those, not only for the malting industry, but also for some of the pet food industry.
Peas,
lentils. Dryable beans were trying to be competitive. They didn't necessarily need to increase acreage a huge amount, but they did want to hold what they had at a minimum. So you look across the board at all of the small, and sunflower. Sunflower was, as an oil seed, was also there. Canola, because the canola supplies and canola stocks were so extremely tight in North America. When you talk about what acres can we start switching around, wheat might be able to buy some canola acres, but again, it's going to have to work very aggressively because the canola prices are at record high levels as well. And right now, oil seeds are kind of the boom.
Yeah, this is a year when every crop was battling for acres. That is so unheard of, isn't it?
It really is. And again, some of it was regional in nature. Before all the Ukraine-Russia war started, I was talking a lot about the battle for acres is really here in North Dakota and somewhat in Minnesota. Not so much nationally, but obviously with the war, that has all changed. We're trying to rebalance everything. And again, those smaller market crops were very aggressive early on to try and get those acres contracted and booked in, and it's going to be very hard to switch some of those back.
So quarterly stock's not as big of a market mover just because a lot of these numbers came in pretty close to trade estimates, but we still have an increase in soybean quarterly stocks by like 370 million bushels. But Frayne, it's because of when we took the surveys?
Correct. So the inventory, we're trying to take the inventory as of March 1. Well, by March 1, we really hadn't seen, especially for soybeans, we really hadn't seen the resurgence or reinitiation of some of the export trade. Especially for soybeans again. Some of that was because of not only quality issues in Brazil, but also the yield reduction in Brazil and Argentina. So since the survey was taken, the industry-based survey was taken, we have seen a pretty nice rebound or recovery in soybean exports, not only to China, but also to Mexico. And those numbers for these kind of off-season sales, the sales we normally don't get at this time of year, will really be reflected then in that July 1 report. And
wheat quarterly stocks down 290 million bushels, which is a little surprising. I know we had a smaller crop, but exports have not been that good, have they, Randy?
Not in wheat, they haven't been, no. And we need to, it's likely USDA is going to have to decrease wheat exports. And so, yeah, I think it's primarily due to maybe a little bit of wheat going into the feed ration more than we anticipated, and then also because of the smaller crop.
So with this in mind and with the Ukraine-Russia situation, it's going to be volatile ahead. Any quick comments or suggestions for marketing?
My only suggestion, again, remember this will be exceptionally volatile. Any new piece of information is going to have a huge impact because we're so tight, we're so competitive when it comes to all of the different commodities. So from a strategy standpoint, what I have always been recommending is try and pick a price where you'd be willing to sell or commit some additional bushels. Try and get those orders in ahead of time because you're not going to be fast enough to chase the market. So put the orders in ahead, let the market come to you. It's a fairly simple, straightforward process.
Yeah, because a lot of these highs get hit in the overnight session
exactly,
too. So.
Exactly.
Randy, your last thought?
I'd say be patient with wheat and corn. Let that market come to you. You know, any recovery in soybeans probably is going to be a sell at this point with seeing where the acres are going to be at. It's going to be interesting to see now how our spring goes. That'll really dictate how acres get where the acres get planted. But market is going to continue to trade the headlines.
Thanks so much, Randy Martinson, Frayne, Olson, with our AGWEEK market analysis. Thanks for watching AGWEEK on YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content. We post new videos every Saturday.